Bernie Sanders has a problem. He has a grave character flaw for what he's proposing to do. You want to be the tribune of the people in a political revolution, you got to fight. And again, you cannot pretend that this is some kind of a thé dansant, right? It's not for the faint of heart, right? Especially politics as played by the Clintons is brutal. It is essentially no holds barred. So you got to be willing to compete at this level. Now, as everybody remembers, the difference was 0.2% or 4 delegates. And this gave Hillary the ability to crow that she had finally won the Iowa caucus, which had eluded her before. First point, that margin would have been bigger if Bernie had shown some courage and some guts and had begun to attack the dirty Clinton machine in the weeks and months leading up. Even on the night of, there was this chance, it was quite obvious, between about 10:30 and 10:45, Bernie needed to come out there and claim victory. Bernie needed to do what Rubio did. Rubio came out and said, without saying it, I'm the winner, the comeback kid, whatever he was. Bernie would say, this is our victory. We've overcome a deficit of 40 or 50 points, and we're confident that by the end of the night, we're going to be the winners. He needed to do that before 11 o'clock because that's when the news, the local news, sports, weather, and all that come on the East Coast channels. So he needed to get out there before 11 o'clock. He needed to beat Rubio to the punch. Mrs. Clinton came out. She just about claimed victory, claimed later on. There's a monstrosity. In other words, strategically, Bernie is a coward. And tactically, Bernie is a coward. We have to face this fact. This is the only vehicle we have, and he is a coward. When I listen to him, I get the impression that he thinks that all he could ever do would be to force the Democratic Party a few degrees to the left, force them to confront some of these issues, force Hillary to employ a different demagogy. This is not enough. All of that stuff vanishes like chimeras and dreams at dawn when you get to January 20th, 2017, if it's her, which God forbid, God forbid. Now, then we get to the debate. In the course of the debate, I would say Bernie punted 3 times. One time was he was invited again on the basis of 2 more rounds of scandal on the emails and the classified information. One round was the header that was doctored, okay? That was one round. He missed that one. And now, just in the past couple of weeks, we had this other one about the 22 top secret things that went through Hillary's email. He was then invited to comment on that, and he again refused. He has refused the crown 3 times. Well, I think Caesar did that. Didn't turn out well. So that's one, is the emails. The second one, and this is the most amazing. We'll get to the third one. Let's do a different second one. At a certain point, Hillary went into her Harridan routine, right? She's self-righteous. She's indignant. She says, you're coming after me with innuendos, and you're coming after me with an artful smear. As soon as she said artful smear, the booze filled the booze, and some booing filled the room. And Bernie could have ridden that. Bernie had the crowd on his side, and he could have gone after her. But when she challenged him, come out and say what you're really saying, he needed to say, Mrs. Clinton, you are a puppet of Wall Street, and you are disqualified as the Democratic Party nominee because the new majority in the Democratic Party is anti-Wall Street, and you represent the dirty, corrupt old order that gave us the legalization of derivatives in 2000, and you gave us interstate banking, and you gave us the abolition of Glass-Steagall and all these other points. So that's why, Mrs. Clinton, you are out of the question as a nominee. He can't do that. He's too weak. We've seen in recent days, he seems to be obsessed with the independents, the fussy independents who don't like fighting. They'd rather have genocide than a little acrimony in an election. They'd rather have a dictatorship or a World War III. Independents would rather have that than have a real knock 'em down, drag 'em out fight where you just go in there and do what she challenged you to do. Since you ask me, Mrs. Clinton, here's what I really think. You're bought and paid for by Goldman Sachs. You're corrupt. You're a slave of Wall Street, and on and on. But he couldn't do that. And then we get the Iowa caucuses. Now, let's just set the stage, right? Because things had gone on that day. Here I'm looking at the Des Moines Register. It is the biggest newspaper in Iowa. The Des Moines Register on the morning of the 4th, in good time for this debate, because Chuck Todd knew about this article and actually cited it. But let's get to the article. The Des Moines Register called for an audit of the Iowa results. It means, in effect, a recount. Bernie should have been in court demanding a recount. Go into court, say, I want the impoundment of these records. I want all of this stuff to be put under lock and key with a bailiff and a judge guarding it. Des Moines Register says the same thing. They want to have an audit of the Iowa results. So here it is, the editorial, the Thursday editorial of the Des Moines Register said the Iowa Democratic Party has got to prove that the Monday caucus results were not corrupt but were correct. Entitled, editorial, Something Smells in the Democratic Party. It reminds me, something rotten in the state of Denmark, right? Bernie's terrestrial paradise. If Bernie doesn't start fighting, he's going to be sent back to Denmark, right? This area that he thinks is such a wonderful social democratic area. And maybe they'll strip his assets. They'll come in and say, you're a refugee from the U.S. and we're going to confiscate your personal net worth, which is the new social democratic tactic there in Denmark. Once again, the world is laughing at Iowa. We'll give you more of this in just a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C. So, Bernie, you're going to be sent back to Denmark if you don't fight. Another occasion this week, Washington Post had a report from Bernie's doctor that he is in good health. I would say, no, he's not in good health. He needs an emergency backbone transplant. An emergency backbone transplant for Bernie Sanders is indicated. So his doctor should have reported there seems to be this void where his spinal column should have been, or maybe also an addition, a guts implant, right? Give him some guts so he could fight. And of course, Bernie, you say you're going to lead a political revolution and you're too scared to call for a simple, traditional, bourgeois recount or the impoundment of the results or an audit, whatever it is. So he's up there. Chuck Todd of MSNBC says, Senator Sanders, the biggest newspaper in the state of Iowa, is saying that something stinks in the Democratic Party, a real understatement, that, again, editorial, something smells in the Democratic Party. Once again, the world is laughing at Iowa. What happened Monday night? This all Des Moines Register direct quote, what happened Monday night at the Democratic caucuses was a debacle, period. Democracy, particularly at the local party level, can be slow, messy, and obscure. But the refusal to undergo scrutiny or allow for an appeal reeks of autocracy. The Democratic Party must act quickly to assure the accuracy of the caucus results beyond a shadow of doubt. It's the razor-thin victory, the 0.2% or 4 delegates. This is like, that's enough, that's like a van full of people, essentially. This is too close to call, not to do a complete audit of results. I go on. Too many accounts have arisen of inconsistent counts, untrained and overwhelmed volunteers, confused voters, cramped precinct locations, a lack of voter registration forms, and other problems. Too many of us, including members of the Des Moines Register editorial board, who were observing the caucuses, saw opportunities for error among Monday night's chaos. Now, in baseball, we would call this the biggest, fattest gopher ball pitch that was ever dished up. Bernie refused to swing. My God, what ineptitude, what cowardice, what bungling. It's unbelievable. I'm still reeling. And I hope his followers could see what was happening. He said, "Oh no, in principle fine, but I'm not going to make a big deal out of that. What's Iowa after all? It's only 25 votes, and we're competing for 2,500 votes. So let's get on to the next thing." Now, does he really think that that's acceptable? Again, if you went out and knocked on doors and rang doorbells and called your neighbors and worked in a phone bank, that's hours and hours of your life. And he's willing to throw it away so that he can come on as Mr. Clean, or as I rather say, Little Lord Fauntleroy. Man, I didn't know Little Lord Fauntleroy was just born over the Brooklyn line, but apparently so. Naturally, if you're a democratic socialist, it means that you're a social democrat, and their record is bad. Look at Germany in 1918, 1919, 1920. Very, very bad. Or how they told you to vote for Hindenburg in 1932, who then brought in Hitler. Their record quite bad. So Bernie blew it. He flubbed it. He punted 3 times, even though she was getting booed. And he rejected these things as issues. Now we have to dig down a little bit further in this. In particular, the Goldman Sachs lecturers, right? The $600,000 and $700,000 in Goldman Sachs lecture fees. Here we see that Chuck Todd is more aggressive in the service of Bernie than Bernie is in the service of Bernie. In other words, Bernie doesn't probe anything. Forget about the emails, not an issue. Forget about the vote fraud in Iowa, which is so clear. All he had to do is say, well, I don't know, that's not my style, but certainly if the biggest newspaper in the state wants to have an audit, then maybe that's a good idea. And I'll tell my campaign lawyers to come in as amici curiae on the side of the Des Moines Register, right, and get a lawsuit going, right? So she's going to scream bloody murder, right? She's going to squawk. So what? Politics ain't beanbag, Bernie. It's brutal, especially in late imperialism. We have all these problems. So, and then on the Goldman Sachs lecture, so Chuck Todd gets up there and he says, Hillary, you gave these speeches to Goldman Sachs. $700,000. $700,000. And so will you now, Mrs. Clinton, commit to a little bit of a contretemps, you see? But now, Mrs. Clinton, will you commit to making public, to publishing, to posting online, either the transcripts or the recordings of your interactions with Goldman Sachs, Big Pharma, and all the rest of it? And she says, well, I don't know. I'll look into it. So Chuck Todd seems to know that these records do exist. Is Bernie interested? Again, he's a very lukewarm person. I would say to Bernie, look, Bernie, if you can't be loyal to the voters, if you can't be loyal to the issues, at least be loyal to yourself. For God's sake already. Be loyal to yourself, Bernie. So let's see. I actually have here, I was able to secure a rush transcript of one of these actual appearances by Hillary. Let me see if I can find it. I put this on Twitter as soon as I could. So here's the rush transcript. Hillary speaking at Goldman Sachs, and she finishes her speech and she starts the Q&A. Lloyd Blankfein, the boss of Goldman Sachs, says, "Thank you, Mrs. Clinton, for blocking all the reform proposals and keeping our tax scams in order. And now, just to prove that your heart is in the right place, now you jump." And Hillary Rodham Clinton says, "How high, Mr. Blankfein? How high?" That's what we're dealing with. That's what I've been able to to reveal with a document dump. So you get the idea. Now, let's talk about why. I mean, we know Bernie has been feckless and cowardly during the whole thing. But I stress, I'm not trying to run him down. I'm telling people to vote for him. Yeah, let me make that clear. Vote for Bernie. Hold your nose and vote for Bernie. If you're a Republican, get out of that cesspool, go to the Democratic side, and vote for Bernie for the sake of the United States and our future and the future of mankind. And you have a positive moral responsibility to vote for Bernie. It's like a sacrament, right? The sacrament works quite independent of the mental state of the person who's administering the sacrament. So Bernie can help us save the world, even though he's really kind of a wee timorous beastie, we might say. Now, Bernie has got some hacks that he's brought in, and I want to focus on one of them. Tad Devine was the spin doctor that the Bernie campaign sent out on the night of the debate now this week. How are you going to lead a revolution if you won't request a recount? Oh, my God. How are you going to tell people, how are you going to face your volunteers when you didn't fight to preserve the fruits of their labor? How can you tell people to go and vote in New Hampshire if you're not, obviously you're not going to fight for that either? The other thing is, the Clinton machine is not limited to vote fraud in Iowa. The Clinton machine can give you vote fraud in New Hampshire. If you want to have some hope of deterring that, you got to scare the people involved. You got to make some pretty apocalyptic, blood-curdling threats. You got to growl, Bernie. You got to say, yeah, we're going to fight vote fraud in Iowa, and we're going to fight vote fraud here in New Hampshire. And if you think you're going to go out there and do vote fraud for Hillary, you better guess again, because we're going to get you in your servers and your phone and all this other stuff. And it's just a disaster. So, Tad Devine. Okay. Now, what do we have with these people? Well, one of his tendencies is that he's always a loser. Gore 2000. No, I'm sorry. Dukakis, 86? A failure. He was on the Dukakis for president campaign. He was on the Gore for president campaign. He was on the Kerry for president campaign, right? Reminds me of Bob Shrum, who's an expert, even though he's never won anything. You have to think Trump, what Trump will say about that stuff. So this guy Devine, as well as Bernie's actual campaign manager, they were both on MSNBC. And as soon as this question came up of will Bernie fight the vote fraud, they both mocked it. They ridiculed this possibility, right? Oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to be going on to these other states. Look, Bernie supporters, I urge you, if there are any politically attuned individuals with leadership qualities in that cohort of volunteers that Bernie has in Manchester, New Hampshire, and Derry, and Concord, and all those places, Rochester, you guys have got to do something. I appeal to you directly, right? And I'm doing this with all the goodwill in the world. And it's a stark situation. You've got to get organized, and you've got to go to Bernie and say, look, Bernie, this is wrong what you're doing. This is a loser. And start exerting pressure and put out a manifesto. Now, this is also known. Here's the thing. In the MSNBC broadcast last night, we had Andrea Mitchell coming out with a remarkably frank appraisal. Andrea Mitchell of NBC News said, Bernie just does not have that killer instinct, quote, killer instinct, unquote, despite the pressure he's getting from the young people in his campaign and in his base to start attacking Hillary on these points, the emails, the destabilizations, the vote fraud, the money from Wall Street, from Goldman Sachs, and so forth. Andrea Mitchell. Now, today, on the Diane Rehm show, this is, 2 or 3 million opinion leaders, I flatter myself, since I'm generally in the listening audience. Here we have a debate among the people in the domestic hour from 10 to 11 Eastern that they note that Bernie fails to attack Hillary Clinton on the emails and on the Wall Street money. Part of this is Amy Cook of the Cook Political Report. Trust and honesty issues for Hillary, but Bernie, they say, Diane Rehm Show, Domestic Hour, they say Bernie refuses to do anything about that. And they got very close to saying, is Bernie really fighting to win? I would say, is Bernie really a serious candidate? Is Bernie still finding out what who he is? I think Amy Cook says, Amy from the Cook Political Report, maybe not Cook. Amy says, normally a candidate would attack some of these things, but that's just not who he is. A caller, he called in saying, we don't trust Hillary because of her hidden corruption. And by the way, where are her achievements? She's always ranting about two things, that there's a group of bankers that are trying to stop her. Who? Where? What? And then her achievements, right? She said, I've taken on Wall Street. I've taken on what did you do? What was the result? Can we hear a little bit more? Bernie could easily say, hold it right there. You're talking about this again and again. What did you do, for God's sake? So I'm arguing for a coup d'etat in the Bernie campaign. Kick out those Washington hacks, because those guys are high-priced losers, right? They're the ones who gave you Dukakis and Gore and Kerry. Some of them, I'm sure, gave you Howard Dean. All losers. Why pay? Those are the spin doctors. Right now, this could actually be won. You notice, at the moment, the latest Quinnipiac from yesterday shows Hillary 44, Bernie 42, nationwide, total U.S. results. Bernie could, of course, win in spite of himself. So great is the anger against Wall Street and Wall Street's running dog, Hillary Clinton. We're also told today that only Trump has higher negatives than Hillary. So in other words, among the people the American people don't want, number one is Trump, that we don't want, and number two is Hillary, that we don't want. So people in the Bernie campaign, don't let yourself be led as lambs to the slaughter by a corrupt character or a bunch of corrupt advisors, beltway hacks, high-priced losers. Get rid of them and run the campaign as a political revolution. He's been ranting for months that it's supposed to be a political revolution. Well, if that's true, run it that way. And don't accept this idea even that Bernie is absolute and autocratic and he can tell you what to do. And make sure that somebody presses home this question of the Goldman Sachs speeches. And even though it's getting late, you could still, over the weekend, set up going to court on Monday to get something going in Iowa. I urge the Iowa people, just go ahead and start this yourself. Don't wait. Don't run that by our social democratic curmudgeon from the land of Ben and Jerry's, right? Because his mind is in Denmark, right? There's something rotten in the state of Denmark. The Des Moines Register says there's something stinking in the Iowa Democratic Party. You got to remember that people there, they've got to cash in once every 4 years and live on that. So, and that goes for these awful advisors too. Now, obviously, Hillary did take some shots, right? Bernie, she essentially refutes herself in terms of the Democratic base, right? All she has to do is show up and start with this complacency and the idea that she should be president and damn you. And if you question anything, she pulls out the woman card, she pulls out the Haradan card, right? She's so indignant about what you're doing. She is a warmonger, a warmonger, a warmonger. We got to do justice to that. Her hostility to Russia and Putin is overwhelming. You should look at that with a shudder. Look at your children and your grandchildren and say, do I want to risk that so that this Haradan can come out and posture against Russia and Putin? And, of course, she hates Iran. She claims, she has claimed at different times, that she has learned the lesson of her wrong, treasonous vote on Iraq in 2002, 2003. But then she'll argue, oh, bombing Libya, that was a great thing, a great thing. You've got to stop Hillary Clinton or you're going to have World War III. And Bernie has got to get up there and say, you are a warmonger, Mrs. Clinton. You're a hawk in a party. The Democratic Party spent the entire period from 2001, 2002, all the way to 2012 or thereabouts on these issues of war and peace. Is it conceivable that we're not going to have a strong anti-war plank? That Hillary we know, but Bernie is continuing to repeat this backward nonsense about, I want Saudi Arabia to get their hands dirty. I love King Abdullah of Jordan. I like the Emiratis. I like the Qataris and all this stuff. This is simply obscene. It's a monstrosity. Are there any Democrats out there that are not brain dead or morally insane? Can't you please come forward and do something? All that come on the East Coast channels. So he needed to get out there before 11 o'clock. He needed to beat Rubio to the punch. Mrs. Clinton came out. She just about claimed victory, claimed later on. There's a monstrosity. In other words, strategically, Bernie is a coward. And tactically, Bernie is a coward. We have to face this fact. This is the only vehicle we have, and he is a coward. When I listen to him, I get the impression that he thinks that all he could ever do would be to force the Democratic Party a few degrees to the left, force them to confront some of these issues, force Hillary to employ a different demagogy. This is not enough. All of that stuff vanishes like chimeras and dreams at dawn when you get to January 20th, 2017, if it's her, which God forbid, God forbid. Now, then we get to the debate. In the course of the debate, I would say Bernie punted 3 times. One time was he was invited again on the basis of 2 more rounds of scandal on the emails and the classified information. One round was the header that was doctored, okay? That was one round. He missed that one. And now, just in the past couple of weeks, we had this other one about the 22 top secret things that went through Hillary's email. He was then invited to comment on that, and he again refused. He has refused the crown 3 times. Well, I think Caesar did that. Didn't turn out well. So that's one, is the emails. The second one, and this is the most amazing. We'll get to the third one. Let's do a different second one. At a certain point, Hillary went into her Haradan routine, right? She's self-righteous. She's indignant. She says, you're coming after me with innuendos, and you're coming after me with an artful smear. As soon as she said artful smear, the booze filled the booze, and some booing filled the room. And Bernie could have ridden that. Bernie had the crowd on his side, and he could have gone after her. But when she challenged him, come out and say what you're really saying, he needed to say, Mrs. Clinton, you are a puppet of Wall Street, and you are disqualified as the Democratic Party nominee because the new majority in the Democratic Party is anti-Wall Street, and you represent the dirty, corrupt, old order. Bernie Sanders has a problem. He has a grave character flaw for what he's proposing to do. You want to be the tribune of the people in a political revolution, you got to fight. And again, you cannot pretend that this is some kind of a thé dansant, right? It's not for the faint of heart, right? Especially politics as played by the Clintons is brutal. It is essentially no holds barred. So you got to be willing to compete at this level. Now, as everybody remembers, the difference was 0.2% or 4 delegates. And this gave Hillary the ability to crow that she had finally won the Iowa caucus, which had eluded her before. First point, that margin would have been bigger if Bernie had shown some courage and some guts and had begun to attack the dirty Clinton machine in the weeks and months leading up. Even on the night of, there was this chance, it was quite obvious, between about 10:30 and 10:45, Bernie needed to come out there and claim victory. Bernie needed to do what Rubio did. Rubio came out and said, without saying it, I'm the winner, the comeback kid, whatever he was. Bernie would say, this is our victory. We've overcome a deficit of 40 or 50 points, and we're confident that by the end of the night, we're going to be the winners. He needed to do that before 11 o'clock because that's when the local news, sports, weather, and